I can't even get connected, do you?
Oh, we're getting there.
I don't even see the MJB.
I've sometimes used the St. Paul guest.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
That's lovely.
Is there a taller one I can see?
Here, do you want to switch?
Only if it's not a problem for you.
No,
I
of
just
course
hate
not.
being down on the ground.
I get it.
So again, I hate the ones where you get up and it's like, whoa, my knees are at this level.
Oh, this is way
Well,
better.
and I
Thank you.
think I was here yesterday for pre-trial.
We having any, everything's all good with the media setup, don't need any help.
Sat down in this chair right there and didn't realize it was as
Oh,
low
it's
as it was. So
way
he goes,
down.
whoa!
Yeah.
And I was like, are you good? He goes, yeah. It was just a lot shorter.
Actually, would you bring out Mr. Castillo? Council, please note your appearances.
Good morning, Your Honor. Dan Raitt, R-A-I-T, Assistant Ramsey County Attorney for the state.
Good morning, Your Honor. Mark Austin and Alex Salazar for Mr. Castillo.
Good morning, Council, and good morning, Mr. Castillo. We are here for sentencing. On March 18 of this year, the defendant pled guilty to 1 count of murder in the 2nd degree. The plea agreement calls for a prison cap of 400 months. Defendant is allowed to argue for a shorter sentence, including a durational departure. The court ordered a pre-sentence investigation. Sentencing was originally set for June 24. At defense counsel's request, it was continued today to give counsel additional time to prepare a departure motion. The court is in receipt of the pre-sentence investigation report prepared by Ramsey County Community Corrections and defendant's motion for sentencing departure. Why don't we just, before we get to arguments, counsel, are there any errors or corrections to the pre-sentence report that you'd like to point out? Mr. Raitt?
Your Honor, I would note that we have agreed on an adjusted custody credit of 541 days. Other than that, and including our discussion this morning, the state has no noted additions or corrections.
Thank you. Mr. Austin?
I would agree, Your Honor. I would note the 81 additional days are a result of the moving of the hearing from June to September.
Correct. Okay. And I did get that updated information from probation. Okay, so no other corrections to the report. At this time, then, I would ask, I believe, Mr. Raitt, the court is already in receipt of a victim impact letter from one of Corrina Woodhull's friends. I understand some family members would like to give statements at the hearing.
That's correct, Your Honor. I have 2 people that would like to address the court. My understanding is first will be Randy Kirschman, K-I-R-S-C-H-E-M-A-N. And I would ask Mr. Kirschman to come forward.
Come on up here, Mr. Kirschman. And if you could stand there at the podium so we could hear you. Take your time.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, Your Honor. Well, I'm not here to say that I think that the defendant is nothing but a little punk hood, but to talk about my beautiful daughter, Corrina Woodhull, my firstborn child. She's an angel among angels now, but was my angel when she was here on earth. Corrina's come a long ways to help a lot of people, particularly ones that are incarcerated. A lot of these will miss her, and unfortunately many more will not have the chance to have met her. Corrina leaves 5 beautiful children, one who has lost her father previously, and many, many family members who will miss and be affected by this senseless tragedy. If there ever was a good reason for the death penalty, this would be it. But unfortunately, we don't have the death penalty or even life without parole. But if the defendant deserves anything, he deserves the maximum sentencing that the state would allow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kirschman.
Rotten Hill.
Nope, that's not appropriate.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would call Linda Castle, C-A-S-T-L-E, to address the court.
Good morning, Ms. Castle.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Yeah, go ahead and take your time.
I tried to not make it too long for you.
That's fine. Take as much time as you need.
I'm going to make a feeble attempt to show how senseless the death of my daughter has impacted my life and her children's lives so that you can reach a better understanding here today. Up until now, I have given this all to God because it's just too much. But today, I'm taking it back from him and I will deal with it. Corrina was my miracle child. We both almost died during my pregnancy because I have type 1 diabetes. And back in the 80s, you controlled your blood sugars with sticks. You didn't have monitors or blood glucose. So I was 17 when I had Corrina, and we both survived. And over the next 40 years, we were mother-daughter, best friends, sisters, sometimes worst enemies. But we literally had to grow up together, side by side. So trying to explain the impact her death has had upon my life, it's impossible. I don't know how to live life without her. She did leave me some beautiful grandchildren, and that helps a lot. This miracle child was determined and passionate about everything life had to offer. She faced many of her own struggles, and that eventually led to drugs in her life. This battle was ongoing, and the choices she made caused her and her children immense pain and suffering. Then, just a few years ago, she put herself into treatment, and with the help of many of the people that you see back here today, she changed her life and started following Jesus because he became her strength. Again, she did this passionately and with all of her heart and became a voice for the hopeless, that they too could change their lives. This is where Robert comes into her lives and our lives. She thought she could save him, that her love would help them build a life together. She told me she was struggling with what he told her, what was the truth, and what she was actually living. She believed him when he explained that drugs were the reason he was in prison for the several other brutal attacks that he had committed. He claimed he was no longer struggling with drugs and sought to walk the path of the Lord with her. The hardest part of life is knowing when to try harder and to walk away. When we retrieved her belongings from her car, we found divorce papers in the front seat of the car. And she knew it was time to walk away, and that's why she's dead. I do not write this with animosity or anger, but with great, great sadness. Not only did we lose a daughter, my grandchildren lost their mother, her siblings lost a big sister, and his family has also suffered and lost. Corrina's last words were in his sister-in-law's arms, which was one of Corrina's best friends. "Please don't let me die," as she struggled for her last breaths. Corrina was Robert's best friend and advocate. She loved him with all of her heart and soul. Every day, I know he wakes up mourning the loss of her in his life, but he also made this choice. One of the documents submitted to the court said he doesn't deserve prison time, but treatment and mental help. This court needs to know that in his 40 years of life, he has had ample opportunities for all of this. He's been in numerous treatment centers, sober houses, and each and every time he chose to walk away. The Pioneer Press wrote that he was on intensive supervised release, which is untrue. He broke his parole time and time and time again, and had been a fugitive that continuously avoided following any of the laws. He has had excuses for all of his actions, blaming his family for not supporting him or visiting him in the prison, for Corrina not being a loving and supportive wife, and for drugs and sleep deprivation, for murdering Corrina. There is no justice that will be served here today, and the only ones who were dealt with a life sentence are my grandchildren. These are not normal circumstances that any child should have to contend with, nor have such a horrible event take place in their young lives. They will never be able to call anyone mom for the rest of their lives. Mom didn't see them play football, volleyball, or run in track. Mom won't be at graduation. Mom won't dance at the mother-son dance at one of their weddings. Mom won't hold them when they cry and won't yell at them when she's angry. Mom won't go shopping or out to eat with them. Mom will never be a grandmother or hold her grandchildren. He recently lost his own mother, and God bless her soul. She was a wonderful woman. But he had her for 40 years, and he took that away from my 5 innocent grandchildren. I haven't been angry until the probation officer that spoke with myself and Robert relayed a message that he would like to communicate with my grandchildren, as he claims he has bonded with them. My question is, did he bond with them when Corrina was flushing his drugs down the toilet? Or maybe the first time he took a knife to her throat? Or is it the first time he stabbed her or the 22nd time he stabbed her? He still feels a sense of entitlement, and that angers me. I spoke with all of Corrina's kids, and they do not want anything to do with him and never want to see or speak to him again. I may not be around in the 20-something years when he gets let out. But what I'm asking you, Your Honor, is to protect my grandchildren and their future from what the sentencing occurs here today.
Thank you, Ms. Castle. Nope, no clapping. It's the courtroom, no clapping. Mr. Raitt, any other statements from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So the court has before it and I appreciate the comments from both family members. Let's address the defendant's motion for a downward durational departure from the sentencing guidelines. I believe the defense seeks a sentence of 300 months or 25 years. Mr. Austin?
That's correct. You wish me to speak up there?
Yes, if you could. Thank you.
Your Honor, the last memory Robert Castillo has as a free man is from the early morning of March 21st. He was getting high with a friend of his and unfortunately ingested so much, he doesn't recall what happened afterwards. His next memory is waking up in a jail cell, finding out he was being charged with murdering his wife, Corrina Woodhull, in a brutal fashion. He was horrified by this possibility, and even more horrified once, after reviewing the evidence, he was able to see what did occur and that he was the one to do this. He has been extremely remorseful for his actions and has been in the entirety of the time I have known him. At no point has he ever denied he is the one responsible for killing Miss Woodhull, and he recognizes that his actions are deserving of a lengthy prison sentence. We're asking for one with 25 years. I'm not sure, I think there might have been a miscommunication at some point, but no one is asking for him to not get time. No one is asking for him to just get released to treatment, but we are asking for a downward durational departure. And the basis of a downward durational departure is typically based on the nature of the offense. Now, nothing makes a murder less onerous than another murder. There's no such thing as a less onerous murder. Nothing here, I say here, is meant to downplay the effect it had on Miss Woodhull, her family, or Mr. Castillo's family, who was there at the time. But these are not the only bases for a downward durational departure. The court is free to consider other factors, including a lack of substantial capacity that mitigates culpability. This does exist in Mr. Castillo's case. He has long been a drug user, tragically exposed to it as a young child by older siblings when he was less than 8 years old. This no doubt had a substantial effect on his development and continued well into his adult life. While not all of his past criminality can be tied to drug usage directly, it has been a prevalent co-occurring factor. And it's only had worse effects as time has gone on. In the last 15 to 20 years, he also began to experience psychotic symptoms when he was using, particularly in large amounts. These symptoms gave him auditory hallucinations, as well as feelings of paranoia. If the court questions whether this is actually real, I would just note that this is something that he has brought up many times in the past, including at hospitals, as well as his initial Department of Corrections intake on a case over a decade ago, when he would just be starting his prison sentence and would have nothing to gain from feigning that. This is not something now that he is exaggerating, but it is something that only seems to take place while he is using. That is why it did not form the basis of a 2002 defense, and he understands this does not take away his responsibility for what he's done, or the impact, again, that it's had on so many people. He is deeply aware of the trauma he inflicted on his family and Miss Woodhull's family, and all who were present at the Bible study and had to bear witness to those acts. But as I noted, he is extremely remorseful and feels horrible for the harm done. I believe he'll have more to say on this after I am done talking, but I did want to make that very clear to the court. Now, methamphetamine-induced psychosis is something that we do know exists. It affects a large number of drug users, and it is something that can develop as one ages. Much of that initial exposure to methamphetamine comes as a late teenager or adult. Mr. Castillo was exposed at an extremely young age. So while many have been able to fight their drug addiction, have been able to turn their lives around, Mr. Castillo was starting from a much worse position than others. He practically has no memories from before he was a drug user. It's before we even get into the fact that he was sexually assaulted as a child, as well as the fact that he had absentee parents and was in fairly abusive situations. He never had a chance to avoid these lifelong problems he's faced. And we have seen countless examples of people from better situations failing to get themselves out of the hole their drug usage has dug. Even if the court feels that addiction itself is not a substantial incapacity, I would ask you consider the circumstances of how Mr. Castillo became addicted and the ability he would have had to fight for that. Now, that is the basis for the durational departure, but we are also asking in the alternative for the low end of the box, if you do decide that a durational departure is inappropriate in this case. And that's for the following reasons. The court should again factor in the difficult life Mr. Castillo has faced up to this point, from his early childhood of drug usage to being sexually assaulted as a young child, as well as the fact that he fell into a gang after being with absentee parents. But he has made progress in some areas of his life. He did walk away from the Latin Kings. He did drop out of 4th grade after struggling in school, but later earned his GED. He's willing to continue to work on himself, and that's what he plans to do for the next few decades within the DOC. Mr. Castillo's age should also be factored in, especially when it comes to the normal criminological factors that the courts consider during sentencing. Incapacitation is a large one, and one I'm sure the court is considering, how to make sure that the community is protected from someone who has committed violent crimes. And that is indeed why a longer sentence can be necessary. However, it should also be noted that due to Mr. Castillo's age, he is unlikely to recidivate again, given that violent crime plummets as someone gets older, especially once they reach around 60 years old. And any sentence the court grants is going to let him out at his earliest in his late 50s. Due to his age and length of sentence, it's very unlikely there will be that reoffense. The court should also consider the rehabilitation. As noted, Mr. Castillo will get out of custody at some point, whether that's 16 years from now or 25 years from now. He's going to be out. It's very unlikely that he won't return to the community, and we have to consider what's the best path for him to be a productive member of society. He'll have a long period of time of sobriety, a long period of time to engage in programming, and a long period of time to hopefully set things up for a successful future. He'll be coming out as a much older man, and he will need to be able to provide for himself before he becomes too frail to do so, both physically or mentally. And the age in which he comes out may be the difference between him being able to be productive or him just coming out and being a burden on others. It will also be could also be the difference between him coming out to a support system or coming out again with no supports and possibly ending up homeless, back on drugs, and potentially an issue. He has a strong desire to make his life better, a strong desire to turn his life around, to never use drugs again. He wants to make his family proud of him. He wants to make up for all the harm he has done, and he is asking the court to give him the opportunity to do that with a downward durational departure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Mr. Raitt?
By a twist of irony, Your Honor, I am actually attending a wedding this afternoon. And I say that as irony because the reason this case has garnered the kind of attention it's getting isn't just because it's a heinous crime. It's because the defendant killed his wife during a church service. We all know the core values and vows that I'm going to hear this afternoon, where two people promise to put the other person's needs first, to take care of them, and that it goes on until death do them part. Marriage also unites the two families, and in this case, it brought Corrina's and the defendant's families together, and both of them, members of both of them, urged her not to go through with the wedding. They told her, he's still using drugs, this isn't the right time. It's a testament to the kind of person she was that she went through it thinking she could help him and save him. I can't believe that she knew her wedding vows would ultimately be her death sentence. Certainly the wedding went forward, and her last words, as we heard today, were very likely, "Don't let me die." These were to people she was surrounded by who loved and cared for her as they celebrated fellowship, but it wasn't to her husband, because her husband is the man who killed her. What has always bothered me most about this situation is the fact that the defendant has a history of hurting people who care about him. In 2014, he took a hammer to the then mother of his child, bludgeoned her and broke her arm. This happened in front of some of the same people who saw him stab his own wife on March 21st of last year. This happened in his sister's home. He stood over his wife, he whispered something to her, and before anybody knew, he was stabbing her with this knife over and over until his own family disarmed him and stopped him from doing such. I'm not going to say that addiction is not a horrible thing. It is. It often comes between users and their families as they choose drugs over their family, but it is in no way an excuse for what the defendant did to his spouse. There is no plausible argument that this crime was anything less onerous or typical than a homicide. No amount of time that this court gives to the defendant is going to bring Corrina back to her children. It's not going to undo the loss that they and the community are suffering. The state's mercy is the 400 months that I'm requesting from the court today. That 400 months is far more mercy than the defendant showed his own wife. That 400 months reflects the benefit he earned through this resolution by not making it go to trial and make his own family come up in front of a bunch of strangers and talk about the day that their brother stabbed his wife in the face during Bible study. 400 months is the break he gets from the state, and quite frankly, Your Honor, it's all he's entitled to. I'm not unsympathetic to the defendant's old childhood trauma. I wish he had addressed it earlier. We know he had many opportunities to, but instead he went back to methamphetamine and started experimenting with heroin in addition. I hope he takes every opportunity available to him while he's incarcerated to address what is trauma. I ask this court to sentence him to 400 months. This reflects already a deviation from the presumptive sentence. It is just, and it is what he's entitled to. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. So with respect to the sentencing departure, as noted, defendant's motion is based primarily on two arguments. First, defendant's capacity during the offense was substantially affected by the confirmed substance use disorder and reported drug use on the date of the incident. Second, the defendant points out to the physical and emotional state of the drug-induced psychosis that would mitigate his behavior, making the offense less serious, less onerous than typical. And when determining whether a downward departure is justified, the court can only consider offense-related factors, and a downward departure is justified only if the defendant's conduct was significantly less serious than typically involved in the commission of the offense. According to the Minnesota sentencing guidelines, there are several factors that may support a mitigated durational departure, including that the offender lacks the substantial capacity and substantial grounds exist to mitigate the offender's culpability, making the offense less serious and onerous than typical, though not amounting to a defense. In the court's opinion, the defendant did not lack the substantial capacity meriting a durational departure. It is true that the defendant has been diagnosed with a substance abuse order most of his life. There is no dispute that he was using in the hours and days leading up to the murder of Corrina Woodhull. He may have even been suffering from a methamphetamine induced psychosis when he murdered Miss Woodhull. The guidelines, however, make clear that voluntary substance usage is not a factor for lacking substantial capacity for judgment. The court finds that the defendant has not established that he lacked the substantial capacity meriting a durational departure. The court also finds that substantial grounds do not exist to mitigate defendant's culpability in this murder. He did not substantially lack capacity compared to the typical offender convicted of murder in the second degree. In his motion papers, defense counsel argues, and argued this morning, that the defendant did not come to the Bible study that day with the intent or desire for violence. Counsel points to the fact that the defendant murdered Miss Woodhull and did not murder Miss Woodhull immediately, and that it would be illogical to murder her in front of family members. This argument, however, is pure speculation. We don't know defendant's motives. Most murders are illogical and make no sense. Defendant's intentional murder of Corrina Woodhull is no different. For all these reasons, the court will deny defendant's motion for a durational departure to 300 months. Now, alternatively, the defendant argues that the court should
Judge
send.
Kyle, I
Yes.
believe he also wishes to speak, so I wasn't sure if you were just handling the motion at this time.
I was just handling the motion. I was also going to take up your alternative argument for a sentence at the downward portion of the guidelines, but if Mr. Castillo would like to speak now, that's fine, and I'll let you argue also.
Yes, and my argument is complete. What Mr. Castillo wanted to do,
Okay.
have his right of allocation.
Why don't you both come forward and to the podium? Go ahead, sir.
First off, I would like to say how sorry I am to my stepkids, my mother-in-law, family, and friends for taking away their mother, their daughter, their family, and their friend. I'm taking full responsibility for my actions, even if I don't recall anything that happened that day due to one of my drug-induced psychosis. I'm truly sorry, and I hope and pray that you guys will find it in you guys' hearts to forgive me one day. It's been a real struggle for me to even forgive myself for taking the life of my wife, my best friend. I know that God is forgiving me, and I also believe it in my heart that my wife also forgives me. She's waiting in heaven for me with a big hug and a smile, and she's finally getting what she wanted out of me, a sober husband and a godly man. I've been sober for 17 months and 21 days. Once again, I'm sorry for my actions, and I hope you guys forgive me one day.
Mr. Austin, did you have anything else you'd like to add in terms of a recommended sentence?
No, Your Honor, I addressed my arguments in the alternative for a low end of the box sentence earlier, so
Okay.
I would rest with that.
Okay. You can stand there since we'll be entering the sentence at this time. As to the request for the bottom of the box sentence, of course, the defendant urges the court to consider his social history as detailed in the pre-sentence investigation and the Rule 20 reports. The court does not doubt that the defendant has had an extremely traumatic childhood, which included absent parents, exposure to drugs, and sexual abuse. But that troubled childhood does not justify imposing a sentence less than the agreed-upon cap of 400 months, which is 41 months less than the presumptive guideline sentence of 441 months. Obviously, this is a very sad and tragic case. It is yet another painful example of the frightening reality of domestic violence in our community and how easily strained relationships can end so tragically. Corrina Woodhull was a devoted mother of 5 children. She was a woman of faith. She battled her own demons, as referenced earlier today, and addiction to help others in the community. She did not deserve to die this way at the hands of the defendant while attending a Bible study group with family members present. Of course, no sentence the court imposes can bring her back. Hopefully, the court's sentence, however, will give her family and friends some sense of justice and closure in this matter. And Ms. Castillo, I hope that you can take advantage of any programming at the Department of Corrections. You will be an older man, but you will eventually get out one day, and you're going to need to be a law-abiding person when you get out, so take advantage of any of the programming at the prison. I will adjudicate you guilty now of the crime of murder in the second degree in violation of Minnesota Statute 609.19, Subdivision 1. The offense carries a maximum penalty of 40 years in prison. Therefore, standing convicted of that crime, it is the sentence of this court that you shall be committed to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections of this state for a period of 400 months. At least 2/3 or 266 2/3 months of that sentence shall be served in prison. You shall serve a maximum of 1/3 or 133 1/3 months of that time on supervised release, assuming you commit no disciplinary offense while in custody. You will be given 541 months of days of credit against that prison sentence. I am also ordering that you pay $7,500 in restitution. Mr. Austin, did you want to address that at all, or do you have any objections to the restitution request?
I believe that was for the funeral expenses, so.
That was for the,
this time.
that was for the funeral expenses. So I'll be ordering restitution in the amount of $7,500. The fine is $50. There's an $86 surcharge and library fee to be paid from prison wages. Do you have any questions regarding your sentence, Mr. Castillo? No? Okay. Are there any errors or omissions that council wishes to bring to my attention, Mr. Austin?
Not at this time. If I discover one, I will bring it to the court's attention.
Okay. Mr. Wright, anything, any objections from the state or errors you want to point out?
None is noted by the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. Castillo, I'll let you know you have a right to appeal the conviction, the sentence, or both. If you are unable to pay for the costs of an appeal, you may apply for leave of appeal at the state's expense by contacting the State Public Defender's Office. Thank you, counsel. I appreciate everyone that was here this morning. This hearing is concluded. Court's in recess. Nice job, gentlemen.
If I wasn't on your way there.
Oh, not at all. Yeah, that's fine. See you there.
Hopefully, everything goes perfect.
Thank you.
Ahead of time, okay?
Thank you.